The night she was left behind, the desert didn't make a sound. No wind. No coyotes. Just the slow creak of a wagon while cooling under the stars. She stood at the edge of the trail with her daughter asleep against her chest, dust on her dress, blood dried on her knuckles, and not a single piece of paper to prove who she was. No husband. No family. No name anyone cared to remember. Only a child who depended on her. The men who brought her that far didn't look back. They never did. To them, she was a burden that had finally slipped off the trail. Another woman who couldn't keep up, another mouth they didn't want to feed. Someone had muttered, "She'll figure it out," before the horses moved on. She watched the lanterns disappear. When they were gone, she didn't cry. She'd already spent all her tears weeks earlier, when her husband collapsed on the trail and never stood up again, when the preacher scribbled a cross on a scrap of wood and told her God would provide. God hadn't shown up yet, so she did what she'd learned to do. She survived. At dawn, she walked. The town appeared by accident. A scatter of wooden buildings clinging to a bend in the river, like they were afraid the land might shrug them off. A general store. A blacksmith. A saloon already loud with laughter too early in the day. She didn't belong there, and everyone knew at the moment she stepped onto the dirt street. Eyes followed her. Not curious ones, measuring ones. A woman alone with a child was either trouble or prey. She kept her head down and went to the well. As she lowered the bucket, her arms shook. Hunger made her dizzy. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry that echoed louder than it should have. That was when the trouble started. "You lost, miss?" a man asked from behind her. He smelled like whiskey and confidence. "We're just looking for someone to take care of you." She turned slowly, putting her body between him and the child. "Just water," she said. He smiled like he'd already decided something. "Town don't run on charity." Before she could answer, another voice cut through the air, calm, low, and final. "Let her draw the water." The man stiffened. "Ain't your business, Cole." "It is when you're breathing my air," the voice replied. She turned and saw him for the first time. The cowboy stood a little apart from the street, leaning against a post like he had all the time in the world. Tall, broad shoulders, dust-dark hat pulled low. His coat was worn but clean, and his eyes, sharp, steady, were the kind that missed nothing. The man by the well backed off with a muttered curse. The woman swallowed. "Thank you," she said, unsure if gratitude was safe. The cowboy nodded once. "You got a place to stay?" She hesitated too long. He read the answer anyway. "There's a bunkhouse behind my ranch," he said. "Ain't much, but it's dry." She should have said no. Every lesson the road had taught her said no. But her arms were shaking again, and her daughter whimpered, and the sun was already climbing. "Yes," she said quietly. "Thank you." On the ride out of town, he didn't ask her questions. That was the first kindness she noticed. The ranch sat at the edge of open land, where the grass went silver under the light, and the fences looked more like suggestions than rules. The bunkhouse was small, but clean. A real bed, a stove, a door that closed. When she set her daughter down, her legs gave out. She sank onto the floor and covered her face. The cowboy stood awkwardly by the door, hat in his hands. "You hungry?" She nodded, ashamed. He brought back food and left it on the table without watching her eat. That night, for the first time in months, she slept without clutching a knife. Days passed, then weeks. She worked without being asked, washing clothes, mending fences, cooking when she could. He never commented on it. He never stared. He never touched her without reason. The ranch hands noticed. So did the town. "She ain't his wife," people whispered. "Ain't even got a name." That part was true. When someone finally asked her what to call her, she froze. She opened her mouth and nothing came out. The name she'd been born with belonged to a life that had burned away on the trail. The married name belonged to a man in an unmarked grave. Neither felt real anymore. "I don't know," she said. The room went quiet. From that day on, people just called her the woman or the girl with the baby. The cowboy never pressed her. But one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky turn orange, he spoke like he was stating a fact, not asking permission. "You know," he said, "people treat you different when you got a name." She hugged her knees. "I know. You can borrow one," he said. "Plenty folks do." She looked at him then. "From who?" He met her eyes. "From me." The words hung between them, heavier than a promise. She shook her head. "I can't." "You can't," he said simply. "Ain't ownership. It's shelter." Something in her broke open. Not pain, relief. What about my daughter? She asked. She deserves one too. The next morning, they rode into town together. The preacher blinked when the cowboy spoke. She'll be taking my last name, he said. Her and the girl. No ceremony. No vows. Just ink on paper and a nod that told the world to mind its business. When they walked out, the sun felt different. People said her name aloud, testing it. Some sneered. Some smiled. Most just accepted it. That night, she stood in the doorway of the bunkhouse, holding her daughter, and whispered the name again and again like it might vanish. It didn't. Life didn't turn gentle overnight. There were hard winters, lean seasons, men who still thought a woman needed permission to exist. But she had ground to stand on now. The cowboy, her cowboy, though neither of them said it, watched from a distance as she grew into herself. Her back straightened. Her voice steadied. She laughed sometimes, surprised by the sound. The town noticed that too. Trouble came one afternoon in the form of a man from her past. He recognized her before she recognized him, called her by the old name, the dead one. She froze. The cowboy stepped forward, slow and dangerous. That's not her name. The man laughed. I knew her before you did. Then you knew her when she was alone, the cowboy said. She ain't now. The man looked at the woman, at the child clinging to her skirt, at the people watching. He saw it then, the way the land itself seemed to back her claim. He left without another word. That night, she cried, not from fear, but from something like victory. Years later, people would say the cowboy saved her. They were wrong. He gave her a last name. She built the life. And the girl who once slept against her chest on a forgotten trail grew up knowing exactly who she was and where she belonged.